Hi, this is PG of PG's Lumacy. In this tutorial, we will be making a Hello Kitty charm on a single rainbow loom. Let's get started. We will first place the bands on these three center pin bars and then add the bands on the sides. Please take note of the exact sequence in the placement of the bands, as it is very important for this project. Our loom is in a standard rectangular configuration, meaning the pins are aligned. The arrow is pointing downwards, and we will be placing the bands from top to bottom. To make the head, we will be using white double bands. That is two bands put together. And we start with the center pin to the pin on the screen left. And do that on the other side, from the center pin to the pin on the screen right. Then we add a row of white bands. And then another row of white bands. We will add another row of white bands, starting with the center, and this time the bands on the side will be at a diagonal from the center pin to this pin over here. Let's do that on the other side. From the center pin to this pin over here. Next, we will be adding the bands for the dress. Take note of the sequence in the placement of the bands. We will be using red double bands from the center pin to this pin on the side. And let's do that on the other side as well, from the center pin to this side. And then next, we will add 4 rows of double red bands. That is 4 rows of double red bands. Let us now add the arms. To make the arms, we will be using these unused pins in the arrangement. We will be placing 3 rows of double bands for the arms, and since we need 2 arms, we will be doing 2 sets of those. Let's do the first one. Let's do that for the other arm. Then we will add cap bands on these end pins over here to hold the arms together. For the cap band, we will use a single band that will be wrapped around this end pin 3 times. You may want to push down these double bands. Here's the single band, and we wrap it 3 times. 1, 2, and 3 to form the cap band. Let's do it for this pin. let us loop the bands for the arms going into the cap band that we placed. Get the double bands. You might want to hold on to this cap band to keep it in place. Get the double bands and loop them to the forward pin. Get these double bands and loop to the forward pin. And the next. Let's do that for the other arm. Now we take the entire arm piece off the loom and we get the arm. And we place that on the shoulder area of the arrangement. Let's do that again for the other arm. And then we place it on the shoulder area of the layout. Now here is where we adapt the layout for a 5-pin bar extended loom to a single loom. To do that, we first push down all the bands that are already on the loom. We push them down as low as we can get them, because we will be adding an additional layer of bands. And those bands are the ones that are on the outer sides of the original layout. So doing one side at a time, for the head we will add 3 additional sets of white double bands. And please take note of where I place them. We place double bands from the center to this pin on the screen left. And then we add double bands to these pins over here, and another pair of bands to this pin over here. 1, 2, 3. Let's do that on the other side. We will also do that for the bottom part of the dress, the skirt part of the dress. To put these bands on the sides, we will be using red double bands. And the first pair we put from this pin to that pin. The next one goes from this pin to that pin. And then the last one from this pin to this pin. Let's do that for this other side. And those are the additional layers of band that we have added to adapt the design to a single loom. For the legs, we will be placing them on this side and on this side. Let's start with this side first. We'll be using 2 bands and then 3 bands. Let's do that on the other side. And then we place cap bands on these end pins like we did the arms. For that, we get a single band and wrap it to this pin 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Let's do that for this other end pin. 1, 2, and 3. Now we will place the legs. For the legs, we will be placing them on this side and on this side. Let's start with this side first. We'll be using 2 bands and then 3 bands. Let's do that on the other side. 2 bands and then 3 bands. And then we place cap bands on these end pins like we did the arms. For that, we get a single band and wrap it to this pin 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Let's do that for this other end pin. 1, 2, and 3. Now we will add the horizontal bands that will hold the piece together. We will go from the top. For this row of pins that is second from the top, we place a single band. For the next row of pins, we will place a single band that is twisted and then folded to itself, and it forms a double loop band, and we will place it on these 3 pins. We will move on to the dress. Take a single band and place it on this row of pins. And take another single band, twist it, and fold it to itself to form a double loop band, and place it on this row of pins. We will be placing the horizontal bands for these rows of pins later. Let us now start looping the bands, starting with the bands for the legs. You will have to pay particular attention to the sequence of the looping. Go into the cap bands and then dig out the triple bands underneath. You might want to hold on to the cap bands, and then you loop the triple band to their forward pin. And then dig out the double bands and loop to the forward pin. Let's do that on this other leg. Now let us work on the dress. You have to remember that there are 2 layers of bands on this layout. And we will be working 1 layer at a time, 1 side at a time. Let us work on this side first. You go into this horizontal band and the white bands from the legs. You dig out the double band, the top layer of double bands. And then move it or loop it to this forward pin. Going into this horizontal band, you dig out the top layer of double bands and loop it to the forward pin. Dig out this double bands and loop to the forward pin. Now very carefully, we will move these bands out of the way. And we will be very careful not to get this horizontal band off the loom. Now we will take these end loops from this pin and move them to the pin below. Let's do that for this side. Again, going into this horizontal band and the band from the legs. You dig out the top layer of double bands. Get them out of this pin and loop to the forward pin. Going into this horizontal band, dig out the top layer of double bands. Move it out of the pin and loop to the forward pin. Dig out the top layer of double bands, loop to the forward pin. And then like we did on the other side, we move the bands over to get them out of the way for the other layer. Be very careful not to get this horizontal band off the loom. And then we move these end loops from this pin to the pin below it. Take note that these loops were taken off this pin to make way for the top loops. And we will get this arrangement. Now let us work on the bottom layer of bands. Before we do that, we get a single red band, twist it, fold it to itself to form a double loop band, and place it on this row of pins. And then we take another single red band, twist it and fold it to itself, form a double loop band, and place it on this row of pins. Then we will loop the bottom layer of bands, starting with the middle bands. We will want this horizontal band to be in the loop. So we move it over this pin, and then we loop this double bands to the forward pin. That is only for this center pins over here. We move over to this side, and going through all the bands on top, we dig out the double layer of bands in the bottom, move them out of the pin, and loop it to the forward pin. Going through this horizontal band, we dig out the double bands underneath, take them out of the pin, and loop to the forward pin. And then going to this side, go through all the bands on top, dig out the bottom layer of double bands, and loop to the forward pin. Dig out for these double bands and loop to the forward pin. And then we get these double bands in the center and loop to the forward pin. So that would be the bands for the skirt. And then we move now to looping the top of the dress. Then going through the white bands from the arm, you dig out the double bands underneath, the red double bands underneath, move them out of this pin, and then loop to this center pin. Go through these white bands from the arms, dig out the double bands underneath, and loop to this center pin. And that finishes the looping for the dress. We will now work on looping the bands for the head. And just like the dress, we have two layers of bands on each side. And we will be working on the top layers first, one side at a time. Before we loop the bands, we will add the ears. And we will do that one side at a time, beginning with the side where we placed our top layer of bands last. And in my case, it would be this side. So to make the ears, you will wrap a single band onto a hook 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And you will get 2 bands and insert those bands into the first band that we place on the hook, and you will get this. What you do next is fold the bands to themselves to get this, and you will place one loop on this pin. You might need to use a hook for that, it's easier. And then get the other loop and place it on this pin. You might think of putting the other ear on this side now, but it will have to wait until later. We will have to loop these bands first on this side and get them out of the way, and then we will add the second ear. So let us now loop the bands for the head, starting with this side. So we will work on these bands first, and in my case this would be the bands on the top, going through this layer of red bands. I dig out the bands on the top, get them out there, wiggle it out a bit, and loop them to the forward pin. And you will see this teardrop shape indicating that we're doing it right. Onto the other side, dig out the next layer of double bands, wiggle it out a bit, and place it to this forward pin over here. And then dig out these layer and move to the center pin. Sometimes you have to free up the bands a bit. Okay, so these teardrop shapes indicate that we are doing it right. Now, going to this side, we go through this horizontal band and this loop from the neck area. We dig out only the top layer, remember the top layer of double bands. We are not going through to this layer, but only this top layer over here. Get it out of the pin and loop it to the forward pin. Likewise, you go through this horizontal band, you dig out the top layer of double bands and loop to this pin over here. Then you will see a thick layer here, so you have to make sure you're getting the right band. Go through the band that we placed for the ears, dig out the top layer. You might want to hold on to the other bands, dig it out of this pin, wiggle it out a bit, and then loop it to this pin on the center. And then you will dig out the top layer of bands, all the layers of bands that we place on this center pin. You dig them out, take them out of this pin, get that out of this pin, and then move the loops that we got from the center pin to this pin on the top right. Be very careful. So in this layer of bands we have this side of the head and the ears. It will be a thick layer. So make sure you got everything right. Now let us work on this other side. If you missed anything on this side, I hope that you will catch it with this side. Okay, so what do? Going through this horizontal band and this loop over here from the neck, we dig out only the top layer of double bands, get it out of the pin, and loop it to the forward pin. Going through this horizontal band, we dig out this double layer of bands and loop it to the forward pin. Oops, I forgot to add the ear. So let's just backtrack a bit and return this to this pin for now. And let us add the ears to this side. So, like we did the first ear, wrap a single band 3 times to a hook, and then thread double bands, 2 bands into that first band, and you will form this. You fold each band to itself to get this, and then place 1 loop on this pin and the other loop on this pin. Okay, now let us resume looping. You get these double bands and loop them to that pin. And we will have a thick layer of bands over here, but we are only getting these double bands. See that? We are only getting this. We're going through these bands to get to this band. Okay? So we get it out of the pin and then loop it to the center pin. Okay? Now we get all these bands on the top layer, get them out of the pin, get those bands out of that pin, and then move all these loops to this pin over here. And there will be a thick layer that includes the ears and the top side of the head. And we also have to get these loops out of the way so we could loop the bands on the lower layer. So get them out of the way, making sure this horizontal band is in place. Get these bands out of the way and making sure this horizontal band is in place. Now let us loop these bands on the lower layer. Make sure you won't miss any of the bands or your project will fall apart. Okay. And then going through all these bands over here, we are looking for this band. So we go all the way to the bottom of the layers and get this band and loop it to the center pin. And then in the same way, we are looking for this band, get it out of that thick layer and loop it to this center pin. And this is how it will look when we are done looping. You might want to pause the video and check to see if you have the same arrangement. Now all you have to do is secure this center pin, the bands on the center pin, with a single band. So you go through all the bands and then take your single band and then loop it onto those bands. Make a knot. And then secure it. Okay. And we are now ready to take the piece of the loom. It might be a good idea to support the bands with the hook so we will not be stretching them out too much. Let's get these bands on the sides first, and then these bands on the other side, and then the bands in the middle. I think we did good. We were able to adapt the layout on 5-pin bars to a single loom, and you just have to stretch out. Now for the ears, you use the hook to dig them out. Now let us work on the eyes. You will be placing the eyes on the top of this loop over here. It's found in this area over here. It is the band that will be holding the eye. And you will get a black single band, and then turn your piece around. Insert your hook into this area over here, and then you get your single band and then loop it in there. Okay, and then you reinsert your hook, and this time into that area over there, to get on the other side of the band that I was telling you about. Remember that band that I was telling you about? You insert your hook above that and put the other end of the loop into it, and then pull it back. Until you get it out this way. You might want to secure that with a C-clip so that it doesn't get undone while you are working on the other eye, like so. Okay. For the other eye, we are working on the top of this loop over here, and it will be this bands over here, this set of bands, and we go from the back to the front. We get our single band and pull it back. And then you secure them with the same C-clip. The nose is going onto these bands over here. So, like we did with the eyes, we will insert our hook from the back until we get to that side of the bands. Pull a yellow band into there. Hold on to this end over here, and then insert the hook on the other side and pull back the other end or the other loop of the band. Until you get it out the back. Okay. And then secure the ends with the C-clip that we already have in the back. Okay, make sure it's all the way into the C-clip so that it doesn't get undone. So now we fine-tune the features that we placed on the face. Make sure the eyes are showing the two bands side by side so they have a wide appearance and not a slit like this. You fix them so the bands are side by side. Okay. You see this overlapping on the band on the nose. Like I said, we want the bands to be side by side and not over each other. And there you have the eyes and the nose. Now for the whiskers, you will take a single black band and stretch it, and then break it. And then we will be looping or threading this band onto the side of the face to form the whiskers. A detail of this technique is discussed in the shark tutorial on my Rainbow Loom channel, PG's Loomacy. We will be using a fine crochet hook for this, but if you don't have a fine crochet hook, you can also use the hook from the Rainbow Loom kit, but it's more convenient to use the finer crochet hook. So just determine where you want the whiskers to be at. So insert the hook from the back, and get it out to where you want the band to be at, and then pull the band in. Okay. Make sure you have enough allowance. Hold on to that, and then take this band around to the side of the face, and then insert your hook from the front in the spot where you want the whisker to be at, and take it out the back. Pull the band in and out the front. Okay. And then take it back again. And then insert your hook from the front to where you want the third whisker to be at, and then pull the band into that area. Okay, and take it around back. And then just even out the tension on the bands. And then you will see here I did not have a lot of allowance to tie it, but I'll make do with that. Just tie a knot. Okay. Make a double knot. Okay, and then just like I said, even out the tension on the bands. That's one side of the face, and now you just have to do that on the other side. I have made the whiskers on the other side of the face, and just to keep the piece neat, you might want to tuck in the ends of the bands for the whiskers into the bands on the face, just to keep the arrangement neat. And then lastly, we're going to make a bow for her head. The way I do a bow is just I get 2 bands and then tie a knot. And then keep the knot in the middle of the bands. And then what I do is that I get one of the loops. I get into the bands on the head. Okay. And then I get into these bands over here and get one more of the loops on the other side. And if you wanted your action figure to be seated, all you need to do is pull out these bands from the back all the way. All the way. And there you have it, your Hello Kitty charm made on the Rainbow Loom.